Hello, everyone. And before I get started, we've been waiting so long for it. Happy New Year to everybody listening at home. And I'm excited because we're going to bring in the new year with arguably one of the oldest games, aren't we, Tony? And with me is Tony. So Tony, say hi. How you doing?
Woohoo! Hello and Happy New Year, everybody. Goodbye, 2020.
Yeah, we'll do unpleasant gestures at it on its way out last night. You know, we're recording this like right at the edge, and we're all feeling it. And there are some beverages and things like that. So let's talk about what we're doing. So we're doing 1830 today, and you and I kind of have really been going gangbusters playing this lately. So we thought we'd bring in a ringer, and we call him the archivist. The Matrix 3, you know, he's kind of the archivist, you know, kind of working in that tall building, surrounded by lots of white boxes. And if you have the glory of seeing this shot at home, you see all the white boxes. That it is his background that graces us, and that is Mr. Tyler MacLaughglin. How are you doing today, sir?
Very well, fellas. Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Awesome. You were on the show before, right? Like we had you back one of our first guests, actually, I think that we had on, and we're
That's
like,
true.
Tony and I are like, we want an extra voice to share and kind of help explain. So.
Yeah, for sure.
I
Because,
have no idea why you continue to have me back, but thank you.
it's clearly that handsome mug of yours. So.
There you go.
It's charisma. That's what keeps me coming back.
We're going to talk about 1830. So 29's the original, but this is kind of one of the fathers of the core system, designed by Francis Tresham, and it was quite a while ago in 1986. First, what were you doing in 1986? Because I think we were all around. So I'm gonna start with you, Tyler. Like what was Tyler's life like in 1986?
I was 4, and there was a lot of time spent in a tree fort. I'll tell you that much. Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. That was a big part of that in the sandbox. I'd say that would be where I spent the bulk of my time when I wasn't taking calls and buying shares.
Awesome. I appreciate that. 86 for me would have been sophomore freshman transition in high school. So I was just getting up there. My soon-to-be wife had graduated a few years ahead of me because, you know, she's a cradle robber and all that. But life was probably still like trying to live like Top Gun, you know, doing the Maverick thing, rocking
I'm
the
calling you Iceman from now on.
dude, indoor volleyball was big in my life at that point. You know, things like that, you know, volleyballs as it were. And I was, you know what was big in 86? I'll tell you what was big in 86. Cycling was huge. Greg LeMond was around. The Tour de France was huge. And I was riding my bike everywhere because I couldn't drive yet. It was like right on that edge. So I rode my bike 60 miles down to the Jersey Shore and back from Philly. Like I did crazy stuff on a bike. And then the decline started as soon as I got my license. And then it's just, I've been fat ever since. So Tony, what was life like in 86 for you, sir?
Well, in 86, I would have been 22 years old, married for 2 years.
Nice.
With a 2-year-old son. Don't do the math. And let's see, living in San Diego, and
Really?
an avid miniature board gamer, or miniature war gamer rather, not a board gamer at all.
What kind of games were big? Was it just all scale minifigs, or were you doing some of the actual, like, you know, hex and counter stuff?
No, we were not into the hex and counter stuff. We were into 28 millimeter, the true scale.
Gotcha.
Historical miniatures, American Civil War, Napoleonics, you know, that kind of thing. American War of Independence.
I had you pegged as a Napoleonics guy. I don't know why.
I was just starting the board game history. Like, I think I found the store. We maybe had D&D at that point. But I was also just starting to get into, there was a game called Air Superiority that was a hex encounter aircraft dogfighting game that was amazing, at least to me at the time, right? Like, you could do Immelmans and you could do barrel rolls, and like I remember sitting in the dark back room of the hobby store learning these games and like coloring in my BattleTech mech with all the heat and doing
yeah, man. We did the BattleTech.
Yes.
Coloring in all the little heat circles. I remember that vividly, because remember when you learned that you could, like, hey, if I put it in a sheet protector, I can use dry erase and I don't have to keep doing this.
Legendary times.
86 was a long time ago. Like, I didn't even, Tony, you were married and with a kid, and I hadn't even had a date yet. Okay. Like, and Tyler's closer to the one side than the other altogether. Right.
Yeah. I wasn't even dating. What?
Like, right. Girls were still completely ick, and you were throwing mud pies. So, like, if you're lucky, right? So,
I had a very like Susie Durkins look towards girls at the time, like from Calvin.
Oh, I love Calvin. You can bring that up anytime. That's welcome here. So, the thought that the game that we really love to play, the system was birthed at this point in time, and how much has really changed in those, closing in on 40 odd years. We're on the better side of that now, and it's just like, it's like 31, right? No, 36.
Don't be saying 40 years yet. I'm not over this.
This is why you should trust me to use a spreadsheet instead of chips when you play with me live, because math bad, hard. Tony doesn't like when I say we should compare every game to 1830, because, well, not every game compares to 1830. A lot of technology has changed in those 30 odd years. And he's completely right, but it is definitely, I think I hit on something there it's the Rosetta Stone of the games, right? Like, this is the one common talking point that we have. But the original, and arguably one of the best printings, and Tony will say the only printing, was Avalon Hill. Yeah, the true printing was by the Avalon Hill in the original version. It plays 2 to 6. I really enjoy this with larger player counts. It definitely seems to be good. And, once people get it, it moves pretty quickly. In my top 5, I had said that this was probably one of my least favorite games. I have come around. I do enjoy it a lot more. It's not in the top 5 by any means. I think there are other games that have improved upon the system for sure, but I don't hate it. It's definitely not my least favorite 18XX anymore. Rest assured, otherwise I wouldn't keep saying, like, we have 6 players. Sure, we could play 30 again. I'm fine with that. I haven't tried 14 different strategies that we can continue to play with. So, all right. So that's all fine and dandy. That's the game. That's me talking a lot.
Yeah, Tyler's an old buddy, and even though he lives, north of the border, and
we're just jealous. It's okay.
Tyler was our third rail on Dual Guage and stuff like that, and he's just a great guy. And I consider him. You can see the white boxes Chris mentioned behind Tyler. He is. I call him the archivist, the 18XX archivist, because he is an avid player, collector, evangelist, developer, all those things of 18XX games, and that's on top of him just being an awesome, husband, father, and friend. So,
and runner of an 18XX convention when we are allowed to do those things.
Had a new guy. I was going to go for the first time this year, thanks COVID. But yeah, that's another story. But yeah, I have some questions I want to ask you, but like I spliced in some different questions, Tyler. So this past
Okay.
Saturday, December 19th of 2020 in Denver, Colorado at 5,280 feet, it was 65 friggin' degrees outside. It was amazing. Not just amazing, it was amazing too. And
Right.
so I took an adult beverage and a nice cigar and sat on the back deck. And I watched an episode of Wheel Tapping where me, Chris, and Nick were talking about our top 5 games. We had some interesting questions that were posed to us in that setting, and I wanted to just get your take on these questions too. So,
Okay.
without further ado, let's throw some questions at you. And the standard question is, what got you into 18xx gaming, of course.
I blame the guys at Splatter.
Yeah.
It's their fault.
Yeah.
I was buying their games and playing their games, and then it occurred to me that they play games too, and I wonder what they like. So I sent them an email, and they told me they like these games with trains in them, and so I started with 56 was the first one I bought, and never looked back. It was really confusing and made all my friends sad, and I couldn't stop it. So I had to keep hammering my head against it until I understood, and I'm still working on that.
I will say, I love playing. I've gotten the chance to play with Jeroen a couple times online, and it's he's a beast. He's a force to reckon with.
I've not had the pleasure, but I understand it's quite an experience. He's quite good, I've heard.
Indeed.
I've played Euro games as well as 18xx games with him at many conventions, and it doesn't matter what the game is.
I was gonna say, I don't think it matters what you're playing. Yeah, I think he's just a sharp cat.
Old maid. You're aiming for second place playing old maid. So Tyler, I mentioned the archivist, and we can see the white boxes behind you. Do you have a count? Do you have a number?
No. It's nearish 200 unique titles.
Near
Somewhere
200
in there.
Nice.
I don't know. I don't know how many exactly, but yeah, it's somewhere around there.
And that's unique titles. That doesn't include the multiple variations of each said title.
Correct.
Because you do have that too.
Yeah, there's a couple of games that I have 4 or 5 versions of as they played out over history through playtests and whatever. But yeah, no, it doesn't include expansions or it's somewhere between 150 and 2, somewhere in there. I don't know.
Nice.
That part has never been all that important to me. Just that I have a copy. If someone had a question, I could grab it off the shelf and answer a question. That was the main. That's the thing.
Right and on, to make the game night decision that much harder. That's what that. Sadly, a lot of those. I would say more. I would say half of those at least remain unplayed. For a while there, I went on a quest to try to get new titles to the table, but the group of people that I have at my disposal found that worse than exploring a single title multiple times, because it is very nice to get comfortable and familiar with something before you move on to new things, and I admit that I like that much better as well. I learned something about myself in that whole thing. Interesting.
Well, and they're not the only games that I play too. I do like I like a lot of, like, I'm kind of an omni gamer. I like a lot of different things. I'm very fond of Magic Realm, which I very rarely get to table. That's speaking of old Avalon Hill games. And like anything Phil Eklund does or Cole Worley, anything that they put out, I'll just snap up immediately. They have a good enough track record with me that I'm sure I'll like something about it.
Fair enough.
These topics at first are going to be all over the map, right? But
cool.
Some people out there will know. Some people will not know that you spent part of your career as a chef. So, like, what is your favorite food to cook?
Well, I mean, depends on how you want to break that down. I'm a terrible baker, but I was a very good saucier. But I'd have to say that the best, I always have the most fun with meat, I was cooking meat, like when I got to do the broil stuff and roasting ribs and all that stuff. That was a lot of fun. I like to do that because if you do it nicely, it's like a work of art. Bakers will say the same, Yeah, man, steak.
Yeah, but bakers require math, and
yeah, they really do.
Chefs in the kitchen, we don't have time for math. Like it's one pinch or two. It's no.
Yeah, the only numbers I care about are the timers. Really, that's all.
Right. So you'll see like 15 ingredients, and then you'll see a little TT next to it in our recipes because it literally means like to taste.
Yeah.
Whatever you want, just throw it in there. Yeah. No.
Yep.
Right on.
Awesome.
What about to eat? What's your favorite meal?
I usually would. That's hard to answer. If I go to a restaurant for the first time and they offer a Reuben, that's how I'll grade the restaurant. If they can produce a Reuben properly, a Reuben sandwich, then I will. Then I'll return or not based on their performance there.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would say that's probably I think sandwiches just generally are my favorite thing to eat, but the Reuben sandwich is that's at the top of it. Sure.
Now I do have some questions about fashion and movies and stuff like that, but let's just go right to trains now.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair.
Good.
I mean, Canadian fashion is just plaid anyway, right?
No, denim.
Or just
denim.
red.
We have,
denim and plaid?
Jeans in a denim jacket.
Okay. So like my hard rock Orlando jacket is back in style if I go to Canada. Is that what you're saying? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, if you had jeans and that jacket on, that's actually called the Alberta tuxedo. Yeah.
So what hey, that was all just for fun and gags, right? But like what I really want to ask you is the same things I posed to myself and to Chris and to Nick, right? So name an 18xx game that you like, but you would like it a lot more if it just, if you could just change X. What is X?
Wow, that's a tough one.
Solve for X.
Don't worry, we can edit.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. Make it sound like I didn't take any time to think and that I just know these things. I usually don't. I don't come at games usually thinking about what would need to change. Usually I point the finger at me first and say, how do I change my behavior to work better within the game system? But I think okay, how about this? How about in 18MS, I don't like that you can only buy one train a turn. How about that? I hate that. All right. I would like that game more if I could buy more than one train. That would be
cool.
Yeah.
Mexico, same thing, right? Up until the 4.
Yeah, nonsense. What company? We should let's dabble in this train thing. Let's dabble. Let's see where it goes. Let's not jump in both feet here. Like,
let's just buy them one at a time. They're coming off the assembly line rather slowly. What XX game have you not played that you most want to play?
41.
Oh, what?
Yeah, I've never played 41. Not even the light version. I've never played 41. I would say that's probably because there's been lots of other largish games. Not that 41 is all that large, but there's been other largish games that I've wanted to play and I know are completely unreasonable and untenable. But I think I could table 41 if I could get a group to play it a handful of times. You can get the time down because I know you can play it in around 4 to 6 hours once you're capable. It's not really cumbersome. It's not like 31 or something.
Yeah. Cool.
But yeah, I'd say 41 for sure.
Okay. Is there? Boy, I don't know. This might be an interesting question because you said the first thing you do is you look introspectively when there's something about a game that didn't strike your fancy. Is there a game that you really just didn't enjoy playing?
Oh, sure. There's lots of them. Yeah, there's tons of games that I wouldn't want to play again. Any game that handicaps the player's ability to frolic in the system, like any like MS, I didn't care for as much because of the buying one train at a time. There's a bunch of games that were released through just like print and play. And I think the intention of the designers most of the time is that we need an intro. We need an intro 18xx, and I would like to see, more of the more. I would like to see intro games to the system have more teeth, I guess is a good way to put that. I think I don't like the idea of setting up the false expectation that these can be friendly, kind. I think that's boring. I think those games are boring. And I like GAL for me were, I want the constant conflict. I was an old war gamer, so I that's where I think of these games as war games very much, and that's
business warfare.
Kind of that's the attitude
Totally.
I come at it with. I come in expecting conflict, and when the game is intentionally slowed down by rules to make it so that the game plays out to a more linear conclusion, I don't like that. I like it to be wild and sloppy and
Awesome.
that kind of thing.
When you try to teach somebody new, like what game do you use, and maybe like what style of teaching would you use?
Usually, like when I teach most games the same way, I think. Usually I'll kind of go over, this is the objective. This is what you have to do to win. Then we discuss nouns for a while. This is called this is called this. And so once we all talk the same language, then we can talk about how you use all the things I just described to play a game with, and then I'll reiterate what you need to do to win. Then sometimes while I'm doing that, I'll tie back, like if you've done X, Y, Z, you will get victory points and you'll win.
Right.
See, now you know what all these things are, right? So when I start introducing people to 18xx, I usually start with 89. I think of it as 1830, but a little gentler at the 50% float. But virtually the same game. I don't really teach the game anymore to people unless I think that there's potential that they'll explore the system for a good long while.
Okay.
I'm a dude and I have a lot of things happening. So if I don't think I'm going to see a return on the investment in the training, maybe that sounds selfish, I don't know. But if a person's not going to play 100 games with me and get to the point where their decisions start to make sense and matter, that's when the games really come alive. I learned this lesson a long time ago from poker. If you're playing against opponents that don't know what they're doing, then you don't know what they're doing either. And that makes your job difficult within the game because you can't predict their behavior.
Right.
And maybe people will try to tell you that these games are all about math, but there's a very human element to them as well. And being able to understand what your opponent is doing and to be able to predict a set of outcomes from their decisions. It's a mistake to decide that this person is absolutely going to do this. It's a much better way to think about it to say, this person has these options available to them, and these are the three I think are most likely. These are the things I think they will do. And then to have a plan to react to those things that you think they will do. But if your opponent doesn't know what he's doing, then you can't place him on a thought, and you can't play into his what could potentially become his game, right?
Cool.
So there's a tremendous amount of reward to me when you play with somebody long enough that they start to pick up on your behavior and you pick up on theirs, and you can play back and forth against each other within the game. Like, I remember last time he did yada yada, so maybe he won't do that this time. Or that's when the games really start to shine for me. And 1830 is an excellent. It's a great place to talk about that because the game is so well established, and people have kind of figured out. These are good opening companies. These are good middle of the game companies, right? And so you can there's a handful of strategies that people understand and know. And once you see what people are doing within a game, then you can predict. It gets very interesting. The psychology is more interesting to me than the math. I'll put it that way.
Awesome.
So I hope that answers your question. 89 is the title that I usually introduce people to the system with.
No. I was just curious because, it's something that, came up time and time again during our top 5 conversation because, we all had different intro games. And for me, 30 was an intro game. But I don't want to say it wasn't executed well because I just don't think I was open to it at the time. I think I was that person you're talking about who you probably did not see a lot of long-term investment because I was just I was just completely glazed over. And it took 2 years before I finally came back around, and I had some heavy Euro games under my belt that made me say, you know what, I think I'm comfortable sitting down for 4 hours. Let's do something bigger and more epic. And I kind of feel that I get that. So that's what prompted that.
Having people come to the understanding that they're going to spend several hours losing, and to see value in that. Like when you have a person that can see the value of that and to still pay attention and figure out where things went sideways, that's when you're like, okay, this guy needs to stay. Like that person is.
The problem with these games is that usually happens in OR2, so you really need that staying power. And at the time I was introduced, I did not have it, and now I do. Now I just give away diesels for $2 at the end of a game. So now it doesn't matter.
All right, one more question, bud. Top 3 XX games in your mind for you.
49's my favorite, and then I just kind of leave it at that usually. But
Cool.
For a top 3, I'd probably put 73 in there, Hearthspan, just because of the way that the family of games that's become. I quite like that. I like the little piles of money everywhere.
You actually have the small chips, the big chips.
Yeah, I like that because I think that was a really, really interesting way to explore and expand the system. And then Wolfram being clever enough to latch onto it and realize the potential of it. There's a lot of people that don't really care for Ruhr, but it doesn't matter, right? Like I always talk about music when it comes to this sort of thing. Like Mason Williams' Classical Gas was great. Did Eric Clapton do it better? Well, it doesn't matter, because if Mason Williams hadn't written the song, Clapton would have nothing to cover, right? So nice. It's like a chicken and egg thing, right? Like I appreciate what Wolfram, like the thing that Wolfram grabbed onto is what I appreciate. The fact that he saw the potential for that to be a family of games, like 1817 has kind of become. Like they did something, they turned the game on its head, and then that was like, okay, well, we can do more with that. And that's the thing I like, the fact that they saw that and said, we can do more.
Nice. I have not played Roar. I do enjoy 73. And I
I think you'd like it.
Really want to play it.
Get the expansion. The expansions for it is good, and you can play a smaller map. Yeah.
And I like Hearthspawn.
On a school night.
Yeah, Hearthspawn's fun. Trying to get a handle on the machines and the timing and how they can factor into the rusting schedule is crazy. For sure.
Yes, that's the stuff.
It's good.
I feel like I butchered all your questions, Tony. I feel like I didn't give you straight answers at all, but that's what we'll move on. It's fine.
You will not be the first.
Yeah, you're not the first Canadian we got on here. So.
Okay, all right.
No, all right, yeah. No, you did fine, buddy. Thank you very much.
Good.
Absolutely. So let's move on to the yellow phase. So the yellow phase brings us to the map and the stock market. So in the yellow phase, really the stock market, let's just talk about that because it's not too crazy. It's our standard 3D stock market. There's some yellow, there's some orange, and there's some brown. So you have some fun areas to play with there too.
There's a weird zone in the lower center where you can still drop, but the increments are very small, right? Like
if at all.
67, but around that, it's there's deeper falls, and over here there's even deeper falls. So it's
right.
As you move east on the stock market, right? Your falls can be larger, but your falls they're not as deep. So
right.
It's an interesting market. T, what's your thoughts on the market?
Well, I like it. I like the way that it's set up. It took me a long time to understand the wheel spinning nature of the center of the map in and around the par, where you have all these $4 and $2 and $1 increments and decrements in your stock price. And seeing the value, when I remember the day that I realized that, hey, when I go from 20 to 30, that's a better jump than when I go from 67 to 68. You know, like, like I'm seeing more appreciation, right? So, and understanding the value of that. I think I saw a heat map produced for the stock market on Board Game Geek a while back, and there was a heat map for, it's probably JC put it out, probably. There was one for 30 and 49, just a couple. It was an image of like 4 different heat maps of these different stock markets across the way, and that was a really interesting and insightful way to look at that, which I'd not considered. I don't have a mathematical background. I don't think about the games that way, but to see the stock market portrayed that way, it was like, yeah, okay, no, that makes good sense. The middle of the map or the middle of the stock market's all that's junk. It's $2 and $1 increments, right? You got to try and either play the yellow paper game or get into the browse and then get your stock appreciation back that way, or up into the high values. Like you were saying, Tony, the falls up there are quite a lot less terrifying than when in the early game. Your values are high, but you can't lose as much.
Always a volatile market too with 1830. So
yes,
we always see, at least in our groups, we always just see a lot of activity in the markets.
It's very interesting. I personally have yet to see a yellow strategy on this. I am 900% sure it's there, it's valid, and it's good, but I have not seen it in action, and I'm kind of curious to see that.
There's a few ways to manipulate that. Well, I have a friend my friend Mark Voyer, designed 1882. He discovered the series through the old computer game of 1830.
Oh, the one on DOS.
He didn't know there was board games of these at the time. He just played the DOS version.
Nice.
And he would just by himself against a bunch of computer opponents, and he would play. He played hundreds of games of 1830. But one of his favorite ways to play, and I've always chuckled at, is that he tries to maintain a company or maybe multiple companies where they just run and withhold, and to control the bank from breaking by purchasing diesels at opportune times to put money back into the bank so that the bank doesn't break. And then by the end of the game, he's got maybe 3 companies all running 2 diesels, and he just stomps everything. And he does these crazy come from behind victories. He's won the game several times doing that, and I think that's hilarious. So that's funny too. You can that's your yellow paper, right? Just withhold. But he was doing it in a very funny way.
That brings us to the map. I think the map and also we'll add the tiles into this, because number one, if you're waiting for gray, you will be waiting a very long time. There is a gray phase. There are no gray tiles, which is annoying. There's a lot of predetermined, pre-laid track on the map already. You can see here there's a lot of yellow tiles already out there. The B's never get more than 1 city, so Baltimore and Boston never have more than 1. And the double O's are usually, I think, the things fought over the most. And then the double dits never upgrade, and dits in general don't upgrade. So that is the source of much tickishness, is in those double dits.
Only straight yellow cities.
And the cities are, as if that weren't enough. Yeah, your cities are only straights. You have no gentles, nothing. And some expensive terrain smack in the middle of stuff too. Let's not forget. And we're not
be in the minority, but I think all that works great on this map, right?
Oh.
It would be too easy if we had cities with gentle turns and tight turns, and it just doesn't work for this geography. So I think the restrictions are, maybe they're artificial, but they definitely, enhance the challenge on the map.
Well, I mean, I would argue most of the basic upgraded tiles on here are $120 mountain tiles. You got to get across the Alleghenies and the Appalachians, right? And that's expensive to cross, but there's still a lot of other stuff in between. And I think that the limited tile set is kind of saying it costs you more, or you have to do more to get around things. and you have to find ways to work around difficult terrain, because the East Coast is not like the Midwest. It's not flat. It is not. It's not easy to build out here. It's a hot mess, in fact, I would argue. There's also some interesting things, like all of the majors have homes. Like, they have a place they have to start in, so you have to deal with that. And a lot of them are not exactly favorable locations. They're usually, like, Pennsylvania's home it's a 10. It will forever be a 10 in Altoona. And it's just miserable. So the first thing that Pensy does is gets out of Dodge, because the first city you connect to will be better than its home, which is always interesting. There's some interesting tracks. There's definitely some companies that make more sense to open early than late. Tony, are there any tiles that, like, I feel like there's a lot of tiles here, but do you feel like there's any, for instance, when we play 1880 China, if you're not in Beijing, you're not making a very large, substantial run. Do you feel that exists on this map, or is that kind of more spread out?
Are you saying that Beijing is the New York of China?
Well, I think New York's very important, but I also think, you can offset that pretty easily. And there's only 4 tokens in New York, and it remains two-sided the entire time, right? So, like, it's never a through city at all. Maybe in gray it would be, but
it's the East Coast corridor, right? Like, it's Baltimore to Boston, where all the money is, and the OOs and the New Yorks, you can hit them twice if you're lucky. That's that the corridor. That's where the cash is,
right?
There's other areas. Chicago's nice. The Erie can get something going. That's pretty nice.
Yeah, and the Gulf, I typically see people build towards the Gulf because it tends to be down in the southeast there. But I don't feel like if you're locked out in New York, you're not going to win the game. Like, I don't feel that that's the case, but I feel you want to get there if you can. But the tile lays, the CNA, and all that fun stuff will plot against you for sure.
Yes.
CNA is an important private. Say, have you guys ever played any of the variants?
I have a box I got from Wolfram years ago. It's just like 10 different 1830 variants at a company here. You can, like, mix and match them however you want. But Coalfields is the only one I've ever actually played with. And shout out to my man Peter Mumford again. He's got a version of the same map with the Coalfields on it. That was the version that I played. I had both maps printed for that. I think I have like 5 different copies of 1830 because I
nice.
Just that's cool, and I just make a new one. I like that art. But I had played the Coalfields. We only played it once, and it was with a group of people that I think 2 of them out of the 5 had never played 1830, so it was kind of a waste. They didn't really understand why it was different, and that kind of thing. It wasn't especially memorable.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. I've even printed up the stuff for Coalfields, but I've just not pulled the trigger on playing it at the table.
Right.
But I did notice on board 18 there is a Coalfields map.
Yep. For sure. Did you guys? I guess, has anyone ever told you to memorize the 1830 tile manifest? Has anyone ever said this to you before? Have you ever explained that?
No.
Ever heard that? It's worth it, I promise. But I had that. There's so many games that copy the 1830 tile manifest. It's exactly the same. Like, there's just so many games out there that once you have good working knowledge of what tiles are available and in what quantities, then to be able to transfer that knowledge to a new game, it's like one less thing you've got to learn. And it's probably the most transferable tile set. But to tell a new player that, and to to have I was at a convention once and we were playing 57. And one of the guys at the table said to another player, "Well, have you memorized the 1830 tile manifest?" They were like, "Oh." And just watching that interaction is like, yeah, what an arrogant thing to suggest. Like, that's kind of it's
I know what tiles are there, and I don't know their numbers.
It's good. Like, there have been times in games before where I've looked at the map and been like, oh, there's only 123 left. Like, I should probably do something about that quickly. Like, if it's playing into my plans, but I mean, there's a good argument to be made that if you want to like at higher level play of 1830, you should have that memorized. But yeah, whatever. It's not so important as long as the tiles are there and you can look at them. I think you're good. It was such a funny hearing it from somebody. I'm like, it sounds so silly, but it does have value.
Well, I think that has value in a lot of games to be able to look at that, right? Like understanding what's going to upgrade. Like one of the first parts of orientation of any new game is, hey, by the way, your cities are straight in yellow and dits never upgrade. Is kind of just telling somebody that like right off the bat and telling them New York will never be a through city, by the way. You'll never get that. Yeah. So you might as well just start dealing with that from round one.
Related to that is like laying the green OO in a certain orientation affects, how it upgrades and stuff like that too. That's part of that whole.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think that that's pretty solid advice. So the privates for the game are pretty standard, right? Like we have a couple blockers, a share in the Pensy and the presidency of the B&O. That's pretty much it, right? That's the gamut. But those blockers can be pretty intense, right? Like the CNA, I have seen, because it literally lives on Philadelphia, and it's a double O, and it's usually a very desirable city for both the B&O and the Pensy, and typically anybody else who wants to get in there, definitely early in the game, and it just sits there, and if nobody buys it in, then you're not upgrading that place because they don't care about those two companies. Why should they upgrade? They're getting money, $25 a turn. Why would I do that? Unless you're going to buy it off me for double the amount, I'm not going to give that up. And then there are some other ones, but you still have to pay the mountain hexes. So you still have to pay $120 to lay the tile, but you get the tile. And there's a teleporter as well.
There's one that lets you put a token, whatever city.
Right there in the middle. It's always an interesting, the private up by Canada, A.
CSTL.
Will the can pack be a briefcase or not, and stuff like that?
Yes. We call that private the bolt cutters.
The bolt cutter?
Yeah, that's what cuts. You use that to cut the handcuffs off the briefcase that the president of that company's holding. You just use the bolt cutters.
Exactly.
That's a dirty trick. But that private has a surprising amount of power over the intentions of the Campac's president, for sure. If everyone knows what's up.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. I'm smiling because I'm thinking above.
Yep.
This one particular night where there was jockeying for operating order to buy the 5 train before that company got bought in to lay, it's like just, it can cause some really fun stuff.
Sure it can. Yeah. There's a pretty strong argument to be made that the Camden Amboy is the best of them. It's the best of the privates.
CNA down there.
Just solely because of what you can buy it in for. 402 is a magic number. That's 67 times 6, right? So if you can buy in a private for what is it, like $360? I think is.
Yeah, I think it's 180 list. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of money towards that 402. So that's a big deal, and it comes with a share. It's huge. Like if you don't let whoever gets the Camden and Amboy, if you also let that person get the Pensy presidency, just start over.
It's definitely powerful, and it slows down the B&O and Pensy a lot if somebody else owns it, because there's no reason for them to sell that in, because they also make $25 a round in revenue. So there's there's no rush. I'm happy to hold on to that for a long time. Let's move on to the green phase. So the green phase is when we like to talk about the trains. Like, this is the main reason we're here. So the train roster is pretty basic. We do have the diesels in here, so you get to run those all over the place. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward. Tony, why don't you take out the train conversation here?
Yeah, I got a number of like little topics here, but the little headliner there alluded to the first one I want to ask you guys about is like the Poison 4 train, myth or monster, right? Because like, definitely see games where it gets avoided like the plague, and boom, no hesitation, it was bought. So T, what's your thoughts on a Poison 4 train, myth or monster?
It depends. It always depends. That's a difficult thing to quantify. It's the same with poker. There's always too many variables. What tiles are on the map? What companies are started? How much money have they got? Who are the players? There's lots of different things to think about. That being said, I'm in the middle of a play by email game where we're all jockeying around that Poison 4. So it exists in that game for sure. We're all trying to avoid it. I'm going to end up with it almost certainly, which I'll make the best of it. But yeah, sometimes it's not so bad. Like maybe you guys have played a game of 1830 where the diesels didn't even really come into the game, or when they did, it was at a time when everyone had time to prepare for it. It wasn't so terrible. And that's kind of the situation that I find myself in this game. I'm not convinced anyone's going to actually pursue the diesel because it would cost them so much money and so many rounds of withholding to get it. I'm not sure that the diesels will see the light of day, and so in this case, I'm actually not so upset about that 4. I think I might actually be pretty pleased with it for a while until I lose. At which point, then I'll be sad and I'll blame it on that 4 train. Yeah.
Well, maybe that's an opportunity for you then, because another point on trains is it always feels real good to be the person that trades in the 4 train on a diesel.
Yes, that's a great moment.
I mean, when we played the other night, it was a very interesting game, right? Like, because if a new company starts, which to be able to start, like, if somebody's going to start a new company just to buy the 4 and the 5, like, I don't. That's a rarity, right? But that seems to be like that's the way to get out of the Poison 4 is to start a new company and then just buy both of them.
4 or 5.
Yep, break the seal, and then with your other company, hopefully it's early in the turn order that it can, or close to that one where it can capitalize and maybe get another 5 or get onto the 6 after that. So it's tough. I mean, 3s lasted a long time, and the 4s even, but they ended up in the game we just played. We lost the 3 and the 4 in the same OR, like because once that dam burst. It just went. And like we're like, you're buying 6s? Well, I'm gonna buy diesel then, damn it. And next thing you know, it's off to the races. Like we saw it last night where somebody was ready to tank their stock just to not rise up because they were fully held, lose a share in value, and just to be able to manipulate turn order. So they gave up a lot of income to try to manipulate turn order to get a 6. Like it was pretty. It's interesting how like this game really brings a lot of facets to bear, and it's not just that it's a train rush. It's how can you, using the stock market, strategically selling things, opening companies that you can position purchasing to benefit your core company. And I love that this game does that so well. Where we talked about in Chesapeake, where you could start a late company, but the par price was only $950 and the 5 trains were $500, which meant if you started a late company, you could not buy 2 permanents straight out of the coffers of the company. This one you can. If you start a company at 100, the 5 trains cost $450. If you are fortunate enough to be able to buy both those 5 trains straight out, you got 2 permanent trains running 2 great routes while everybody else is struggling to buy 1 train. You're in pretty good shape.
But then what the game evolves into at that point is you try to jockey the turn order so that the guy doesn't get the choice to buy 2 5s. He has to buy the 5 and the 6, which he can't afford.
Right.
That's that's when it starts to get really tricky. When you
yeah.
So buy 2 trains, but I want him to be able to do that. So
yeah, that happened to us the other night where somebody actually did it, but it was okay by everybody else because everybody behind him had 6 train money. So we're like, yeah, sure, go ahead, buy both the 5s. We're going with that.
Do your thing. Yeah.
Cool. Anything else on the train roster? I mean, the diesels are pretty solid. They can run around. Routes can be pretty good, but tokening tends to be aggressive in this game, so you can get locked down pretty well if you're. That's what you should definitely be tokening. If you have tokens left at the end of the game, you probably missed opportunities along the way, right? So you need to put them down to limit diesels more than you need to put them down to open up options for yourself as well.
One thing that I think is worth noting, or at least it was really interesting to me when I thought about it, or it had this explained to me, I guess is a better way of putting it. Everybody talks about the Poison 4. Like there's a good understanding that, at least it's implied, that not every train in a band of trains is equivalent. Right, that like the Poison 4 is the worst of the 4 trains. Like it's
going to run the least. It's good. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if you take that thinking to its logical conclusion, and every band of trains is, some are better than others. The first 5 trains are great. They're the first cheapest permanent train. Everyone loves them. They're fantastic. But the first 5 is better than the third one. And when that realization sunk in for me the first time, I was like, oh yeah, okay, no, that makes sense. It's good, because there's a lot of games where it comes down to how many times am I going to get to operate this before the game ends on bankruptcy, right? Am I going to get that one more round in, right? And that's it's important to think about that when you're jockeying for position and turn order when that mess begins, and it usually does.
All right. So this brings us up to the brown and or russet phase, where we like to talk about shenanigans. And I think this game kind of started it, right? Like this is where shenanigans began. Like this could be Tony, that's our next game, 18 Shenanigan. That's it.
18.
That's it. We're just gonna put 18 MacGuffin. It's just gonna have every single one of our favorite MacGuffins, and it will be in there, right? But
I think Mark Derrick made a game like that, right? 18 hate you.
18 hate you. Yeah, he did. Yeah, that game is really, really funny. If you're one of us, like if you're one of the people that have played a lot of these titles, and almost everything about it is irritating, and it's done intentionally, and it's very funny. It's a very funny little game.
We kind of talked about, so Tony gave us a few shenanigans to work from tonight, and one of them was definitely stock trashing, and we kind of talked about it in the way that you can use it to manipulate turn order pretty aggressively. You can also do it to obviously hurt another player, the president specifically, but it's always that hard thing to trash somebody at the expense of yourself. I think the one that has come up more times than I care to actually recall is the company dumping and paying attention to the board state and things like that. This is probably the game I see more companies change hands than any other game that I've played to date. Now, what's your all experience with, well, I know Tony's experience because I've been the recipient of a few, but what's your experience with company dumping in this one? So I'll start with you, Tyler. Like, what's your stance on the debate that is public company dumping?
I'm for it.
Pro dump.
Yeah, I think it's it's hilarious, but I mean it needs to. It's I keep comparing this to poker, and I don't intend to, but it's important that particular idea has got a lot of traction because it's damaging and hilarious. Like it's really funny to the person doing the dumping, and really sad and awful to the person who's being dumped on. It's a feature within the game, but it's not the game.
Right.
So like bluffing in poker, it's a tool in your toolkit, but you don't always use it. If it's appropriate and it makes sense to do it, then you should. If it's only good for you and not good for the other guy, you probably should do it. But you know, then there's other weird circumstances that go along with it too, right? Like giving if you dump a company onto a player and you give them a bunch of yellow shares as a result of it, maybe you haven't got yourself any further ahead. You know, it depends too on how far into the future you can see in terms of your experience with the game and knowing what trains are going to get purchased and when. Like me looking at the game I'm playing now, it's like, will diesels happen? I wonder. I don't know. If they don't, I'm in a great position. If they do, I'm going to be in trouble, right? So being able to forecast out and make a long-term plan out of it is important. But I think a lot of new players are just eager to abuse that particular mechanism in the game. I do think it happens substantially more often in 1830 than of other games. In the stock round that I'm playing in right now, I started this stock round having just sold off the Camden and Amboy and the Champlain and St. Lawrence privates for $400 out of the coffers of B&O. I floated New York at 90, ended up passing that company on to another player. And this is going to sound terrible, but I floated Canpack at 71 and then dumped that company on another player and stole another dude's floated Boston and Maine at 82 in the process. So like, this is, and you know, I did all this, you know, with the thinking that I didn't think I would end up with B&M, but I did, and I ended up with a treasury that was only $80 less than the New York I initially tried to float. This other dude who inherited New York is laughing all the way to the bank. I've helped him substantially. But you know, it's funny how it all plays out. And in the context of that game, I think what everybody did made good sense. But to describe it out loud, it's like, so I tried to do all these things and ended up with B&M. It's funny. Third stock round, by the way. All 8 companies running.
Nice.
Nobody ever wants to buy 2 of my company, though. For some reason.
I wonder why that is.
We should know better.
Yeah.
No. What's worse, Tyler? I bought 2 when Tony opened the Canpack for some dumb reason.
Gotta watch where priority lands.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was quickly the owner of the Canpack after it it was deflowered and I was left with it.
I think a nice feature of games like 1830 that have like a par price and a market price is the ability to make a few bucks at the expense of somebody by, you know, buying that share for the $71 par and selling it for the $112 value. You know, if you needed a few extra bucks, you know, drop their price a little bit, and you know, that's not without its own cost though too, right? Because shares in the market pay the company dividends, you know, so it you know it kind of helps the other guy a little bit too. So everything's a compromise, everything's a trade-off, you know, to some degree perhaps.
Yep.
Certainly. So let's see. Tony, you have a note in here that's kind of interesting where you say the president funding a train, but from another company at face value.
I don't see this one used very often, but as the president, you can, when you're in emergency train buying, you don't have to buy a train from the bank. You can buy one from another company that you own at face value. So it's you know, I don't see that used very often, but it's an interesting way to move money into another company.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't really know of any other game that lets the president contribute money towards the train bought from another company.
Right. Interesting. Have to explore that. And let's see. So you wrote something down here I would like to explore a little bit more because this language comes up a lot in our games, and it's sell by sell. When you say sell by sell, what do you really mean?
Well, I think, you know, from what I've seen and employed most often, if I do a sell by sell, it's, let's say I already own one share of you.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an arbitrage opportunity, so I can sell something that I own, make some money, purchase another share of you and then sell two of you to hurt your position a little bit, maybe arbitrage some cash, right? So I can sell something to acquire cash to make a purchase to then hopefully make a more impactful sale.
Right. And I think you see this a lot, like with the B&O when it gets out early, because it can take an early lead because it tends to be one of the first companies. So its par price, its market price can go over its par price, and then you sell you buy at the par price and then sell at the higher market price right away. So you can make an instant $20, which in SR3 can even be the difference between whether you can open a company or not.
Sell by sell, you got any comments on that?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. Being able to sell to raise funds to buy something to turn around and sell it is hilarious.
It's the American dream.
I remember playing in a game with a guy who it was his turn in a stock round. I just never seen it before. I do it all the time now because it's awesome. But he came to his turn in the stock round and he just took the token on the stock market and just lowered it a box and said next.
Right. Right. And he moved a share to the bank pool, right, from the IPO.
No, he bought it out of the pool and sold it back to the pool.
Oh, so bought it out of the pool and sold it back to the pool.
He just lowered the token a box and said next.
Brutal.
Yeah. It was cold-blooded.
Oh, absolutely cold-blooded. Absolutely.
Gee, I don't think there's any really masking your intentions when that happens, right?
No, you're just being a jerk.
And we've talked about it before in the show, but 30 definitely has the opportunity to briefcase. There's a couple companies that you can briefcase in 30, and I think really it's the C&O and the Can Pack, right? They're really the two best, because the B&M starts its life with a root. The Erie, I think you could theoretically briefcase as well, but somebody's going to build to you in no time, I would think.
Even Chesapeake runs into danger of that too, just based solely on the fact that you don't pay for any of that terrain. That's where, Can Pack is the most famous briefcase because of all the mountains around it. You're actually going to cost somebody some opportunity to force you to buy that train.
Yeah.
If you're going to go that route.
Right.
I've never seen Chesapeake be a suitcase before. Usually in our circle, it's one of the first companies started generally. And I think the reason that it's started so aggressively is so that they have control over I believe it's the number 2 double dit, the one with the very sharp turn on the one side. Because if that gets put next to New York and Philly, no, the Chesapeake guy life is to make sure that never happens, or that the New York New Haven player can't do anything.
Which just harkens back to what you were saying earlier, right? Like, be aware of the tiles that are in the game.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, this is definitely one of those games where you reach for a tile and it's gone. It's yeah. And because you only get one tile lay, it's not a matter of, well, I can upgrade this one and free that up for me to be able to use. No, that's not happening. That's not generally an option. So let's bring on the gray phase, because that's what comes after russet in normal games. I mean, the phase is there, the tiles may not be, but it's here for us. So how do we feel about this game? What are some things that this game kind of conjures up for you? And I'll kind of lead off because I've kind of already said a bunch of that up front. And for me, like I said, this game started out as something I hated. Originally, I saw people just running diesels all over the board. I didn't generally understand what was happening. My companies, I was funding them out of pocket and buying trains, and I had nothing, and I couldn't make money. Nobody was helping me, and I was just miserable. And then you fast forward to us playing the other day, and I get the camp pack dumped on me, and I have to buy diesel out of pocket. I was one of those people. I wouldn't say I was a 30F player. I don't need to play that. I think you're missing out because there's a lot here. There's a lot to mine, and it still has a lot to teach me as a player. As far as, you know, Tyler, just you mentioning just like learn the tile manifest, like that's huge. And yeah, and I think that's something I'm going to take back. And anytime we have 5 or 6 people, like, why not keep diving down this hole? Why not keep trying to learn it, get a little bit better, learn a little bit more about the people you play with, their tendencies. Learn never to buy 2 shares of Tony, especially if you're sitting to the left of them. You know, those things, those hard-won lessons, hard-won lessons, I might add. So it's definitely interesting, and it's created some of the most memorable moments I've had in the last 6 weeks of gaming. Obviously you can tell because they're ones that keep coming up. Tony, why don't you tell us, give us some of your feels. We'll wrap up with Tyler, since he probably has more experience than you and I combined in this one.
Since he's Canadian, we'll give him the curling term of we'll give him the hammer.
We'll give him the hammer. I like it. I love it.
Is it my favorite game? Not necessarily, right? Like if you think back to our episode where we talked about what are our top 5, which really kind of what was our top 10. I did mention 1830, but I mentioned it in the sense of while I do like 1830, a lot of my enjoyment is just what it has meant to the genre, right? And you know, I gather that 1830 is not exactly what Francis Tresham imagined, and I'm really profoundly glad about that. Because the 1830 that Francis Tresham had in mind would not be the grandfather of so many great things, right? And I think the thing that causes 1830 to be this great influence in the genre is its simplicity, right? It almost belies its complexity because there is no complexity. It's just basic rules, right? I'm gonna buy shares and run trains and lay track. There's really not a ton of chrome here. You know, when you think of games that we've all talked about over the time, right? Like there's a lot of games out there with chrome. There's no chrome here, right? And the depth of decision that comes from this astonishing lack of chrome is really amazing. And I really think that 1830 is the full package, right? Like it's got the physical things. We've got map, tile set, trains, the market as well, right? But we also have the cerebral things about reading other players, reading the game state, trying to predict what they're going to do, you know, seeing what their intentions are, trying to plan what you're going to do, and all that brings, like, if you add those 2 columns up, that equals there's danger and there's tension in this game too, and I just think that's the full package. And while like 1830 itself is not, you know, like the pinnacle of what I find enjoying, and you know what I find enjoyment in, I still think oddly this is like an amazing game and has had a profound impact on our hobby here. So I'm really grateful for it.
Much respect. Pour one out for 1830.
Not going to pour one out. That's alcohol abuse.
I just got a melted ice cube left, so I'm okay. Tyler, so what are your final thoughts? Like, what are the feels you get from 1830, thinking back, or from recent plays?
Well, it's almost better every time I play it. Like every new game I start, I go in not expecting to see anything new, but I usually do. You know, I'm at the point in it, like I've probably got over 100 plays of it now, or very close to anyway. And every time I play, I always kind of, okay, you know, maybe this will happen, and then something new occurs that I would not have considered. I think I think it's one of very few games that has aged as well as it has. Like, I can't think of many other games that came out in '86 that other people would still excitedly bring to the table or be talking about on a podcast, today. If there are games like that, you can probably count them on one or two hands. Right? There are not very many. I don't necessarily agree with the assessment that it isn't a good introductory game. I think that it should be used as an introductory game for people, but it also depends on the intentions of the student. Like, what they're gonna do with this knowledge. Are they planning to play lots of different titles across lots of different styles? Because everybody used to talk about 1830 as grandma and grandpa was 29 and 30, and then everything. It's not like that anymore. There's so many variables and so many stilts on the system that you can't. It isn't nothing. There's lots of games that don't fit comfortably into that family tree idea anymore. But as far as foundational learning of the system goes, I think it has great importance. I think it's a really important game to introduce to a player, at least in the first 5 or 6 titles. If you're not going to if it's not going to be the first, it should be in the first 5 for sure. I think it's important to show people how brutal and terrible these games can be, because that's always been a lot of the appeal to me, anyway, is how awful you can be to other human beings while you're playing them. But I think I look every time I play 1830, I'm very pleased to be doing so. I really love the game. I always have. Like, even right from the get-go, I knew it was something special. And I would encourage anyone that hasn't played it, that enjoys 18xx, to get it to the table and play it half a dozen times. It's not the sort of thing you can one and done. It's most of these games aren't, but this one in particular you're really rewarded by playing it a lot.
That brings us up to the end, and I'll get this right because I should, right? Am I gonna get this right? Am I gonna get this right? I think I'm gonna get this right. I'm gonna get this right. I believe in you. I believe in me. It's the priority deal. So,
yay.
Tony introduced me to the habit of having custom first player markers, and one of the things I literally ordered while I was sitting in the basement of his house after playing said game was I went out and got this nice little bronzed diesel locomotive, Santa Fe style, right? Like, it's just awesome. It's a pencil sharpener, people. Literally, like, I just super glued the door shut. It's so good, and it's for 30 specifically, because the diesels, I think, are such a huge hallmark of 30. Like you said earlier, are they even coming and triggering them and all that? So that was one thing I went out and got right away. And I have to say, it works. It works. Size. Right? It's exactly. Unlike, say, Tyler's. Tyler, what's your priority deal look like?
I was gonna. It's funny you say that, because you're referencing this train that I showed earlier.
So mine's ridiculous. Like Z gauge, and he's whipping out this train that's like N gauge. It's so big.
That thing is too cumbersome and ridiculous to have as a priority deal marker. But I actually have this other thing that I use as a priority deal marker, which this is This is a chromed piece of rail iron. It was actually used. It's got like stress marks on the inside. I don't know if you can see it or not, but a friend of mine got this for me from an antique shop, and I actually do use this as a priority deal marker because it's easy to grab and move around. That is until, of course, my daughters found out that you could use this to press leaves in between books because it's very heavy. So every now and again I go to grab it and it's like upstairs on a shelf somewhere.
It's kind of amazing. I have to say that thing's in the 18xx world, that's kind of baller. If you could put that on a chain, I think that would be that would be amazing.
My neck muscles would be so ripped after like a week of that.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, you can maybe cut a sliver off and have that re-chromed, or I don't know.
Yeah.
So, Tony, what do you have, sir? What do you have? Since you kind of initiated this.
Oh, I mean, I do have a pencil sharpener, but I have the old school. I got a 4-train. It's
right?
a poison 4-train.
Yeah, Poison 4. It's got a little nightshade in the back of it.
I have a diesel as well. It's a little large, but it is the NYC, my favorite U.S. railroad company.
Nice.
And it is the kind of a train where, as priority deal passes, you pull it backwards and let go, and it just rolls over there.
Oh, fantastic.
And the PRR, I have a little caboose with the PRR in there.
Nice.
That's my favorite American railway company.
Is it? Dude, it's my
Yes.
favorite logo. Their logo is just killer.
They knew what they were doing.
They did.
Yeah, so if Tracks East ever happens, we'll definitely go to the Strasbourg Museum, which is kind of like home to the PRR.
Cool.
So it's got lots
I
of
definitely want to go.
yeah, it's got lots of PRR trains. It's pretty awesome. So hopefully
They had that cool electric one with the two ends.
I believe so. Yeah, they got some stuff. Cool. So gentlemen, thank you so much for being on. I think this is a classy way to start 21. So I think I think 30 needed its due, and I think the consensus is we like it, especially if you have the higher player counts, the better. And the more I'm playing it, the more I'm, I kind of understand that yes, there are certain things you could do and should do, sure, but that the same could be said of any game unless it has a completely random setup. So, it is what it is. But figuring that out and watching other people foil your best laid plans is always super annoying and super fun all at the exact same time. And I think that kind of sums up 1830 in a nutshell.
Yep.
But it's nothing personal. It's just business.
It's just business.
It's business, baby.
Just business. We're gonna say have a good New Year. 2021 has the bar is set very low for being a better year than last. So hopefully yours is good, and we'll continue to explore new games, have some fun, and thank you, Tyler, for coming on. This was awesome to have you rejoin us again. Yeah, and
anytime.
Yeah, definitely know what's going on. So we're gonna say goodnight. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy. This Week in Each Week is brought to you by Game Toppers. Check out a great mat or game topper at GameToppersLLC.com. Tony and I would like to give a special shout out to all the patrons who support the show. Thank you for listening, supporting, and taking care of us. You can also help us out if you want a shirt. Be sure to check us out on Teespring.
Where we all
Bring something
to the table.
Pull up a chair.